Well, it's time for another edition of the Kaufman Corner with the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. My name is Soren Petro. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Tonight, we asked the question, I can't believe we're doing it this early. We're not even to the NFL draft. We're asking, is it time to blow this team up? If you did blow it up, what would it look like? What is there to blow up? Where is their value? What could you move around? We're going to try to dive a little bit deeper into that kind of conversation tonight. Is Matt Quatraro in over his head? Are we already ready to say that with the Royals' new manager? Is it coaching or talent? And of course, Rany Jazayerli always has our minor league minute. It's all coming your way right now here on Kaufman Corner.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. GAN Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions. Project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience. With paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out ganasphalt.com for more info. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome. Remember, if you are catching us via the podcast, you can be a part of the conversation. We stream live usually, and this week it is Sunday night at 10 p.m. Central Time. If you want to be a part of the conversation, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all places where you can catch the podcast live and be a part of the conversation. So if you would like to, I got a lot of people lining up in the chat room already. We'll get to some of their thoughts and comments. But Rany, we want to start tonight by discussing whether or not at this early stage of the season, are we already at a point where we're going to say, you know what, it's time to blow this thing up?
Well, Soren, when we did our preseason preview, I said that while we both, I think, landed at 77 wins for this team, I made the case that there were very wide error bars on it. There was a lot of deviation in terms of which way the Royals could go. And I chose to look at the upside of that, which is that if everything broke right, this team could be a surprise playoff contender. The flip side of that is that if everything goes wrong, 100 losses is in play. And we seem to be, as we always seem to be, in the everything goes wrong alternate universe timeline that the Royals always find themselves in, except for 2014 and 2015. So here we are, 5-17. I want to take you back to not too long ago when the Royals were riding the wave of some really good pitching, and you and I could do nothing but rave about all the new pitches that we were seeing and all the new pitchers. The same pitchers looked like new pitchers. And Kris Bubic had just come off the greatest start of his career and looked like a burgeoning ace. I want to take you all the way back to April 9th, 2 weeks ago, Soren. 2 weeks ago, you and I had some optimism. It took 2 weeks for the Royals to crush that optimism out of us. For the brightest star in there for a minute, the brightest story of the season, to blow out his elbow in his very next start. He probably had blew it out in the best start of his career. The best thing I can say, we talked about the Royals letting him throw 100 pitches with the diminished velocity on a 46-degree day, and then finding out afterwards that he had tightened in his form. The best thing I can say for the Royals is it probably didn't matter he probably was going to have Tommy John no matter what.
Right.
I can't say that with certainty, but I'm going to just give them a pass on that. They handled it badly, probably didn't matter. But if the best thing I can say about the Royals is that their best story was going to be ruined, whether they behaved rationally or not, it hasn't been a good month. The Royals are 5-17. They've lost 12 of 13 at home, which our friend Curtis has pointed out is the last time a team lost 12 of 13 home games to start a season was the 2018 Royals. That does not include the 2012 Royals, who started 0-10 at home. So, yeah, it's not going well.
Yeah, it's not. And I'm looking through some of the comments. Jason says, blow it up now. Andrew says it's time to blow this thing up. And then we get to what we're going to talk about. Cotman says, what are you going to blow up? Which I think is, pretty good. A little bit of patience here. Benny says, I'm too optimistic. You got to give it 2 months at least before they blow it up. 40 games is a rule of thumb. You really can't. I mean, if we're going to talk about trading guys, there's not a big trade market until you get at least into June. And realistically, every deal like that generally needs a deadline, which is, of course, the trade deadline. So, yes, there are, there's time before we get there. But I think the one thing that you can look at, and I do appreciate this one. Aaron says, your podcast is the best thing about the Royal season. Keep it up.
That's a low bar, Aaron. I don't know. I think we need a little bit more tangible compliment than that. That's not, it's possible for us to be the best part of the World season and still be terrible. So
right,
you're going to need to be more complimentary.
Yeah, but I will take it in the spirit I believe it's meant. Listen, I think it is probably still a little bit early, but the thing that I'm seeing is we're going through, like, Bobby Witt Jr. Looks like he's going to be a good player. Vinny Pasquantino is on pace for 30 home runs. He looks like he's going to be a good player. Those are positive signs. But I think the thing that's frustrating is when you put it all together and say, okay, how does it all add up? You start to look at where it is, like when guys are when they're out of team control, and like, can you see all the dots connecting? Because I can't anymore. Right? Like, that's where I'm at, because I think MJ Melendez, I think, could be a good player. I think is going to be a solid player. I'm with you. The hard hit contact, and we see enough of that think he's going to be something somewhere. But where's the all-star? Maybe it's Bobby Witt. I mean, maybe it's Vinny Pasquantino. 30 home runs. Let's see how many he drives in. I think he's trending to be a good player to. But at first base, and not a Gold Glove first base, you need to be a great hitter, right? That's what you need to be. I don't know that he's going to be a great hitter. I see some good pieces, but I don't see the overall collection that needs to come together. And what's really scary, and some people talked about it, in the chat room, is like, what are you, what are you looking at in the minor leagues that you're going, okay, here we go. I know we can get excited about Michael Garcia. Yes, he's looking good, but what do we think he's going to be when he gets here? We get excited about Lofton. He's already cooling off in the minors before he can even get up here and claim a spot. And so I think that's the frustrating thing for me. But, like, I will tell you that these pieces don't add up. Like, I think right now, if you're not going to blow it up, it has to be because ownership is prepared to really invest some money. And I don't know that you can even invest the money. That's the other thing is, like, are you going to overpay for everything you go get? Like, it's one thing when we see the Padres. Are they signing contracts that are going to be bad? I think they are at the end, but are they signing guys for significantly more and many more years than you have to? No, they're signing stars, and stars you have to give too much money to. Aaron Judge is going to be, not worth his last 3 years. That's the cost of doing business on that level. That's who the Padres are signing. Are guys that are next level guys.
Mm-hmm.
The Royals, I don't see enough there. And by the time, and I don't see the wave coming to supplement it. And I don't see a team that can overpay to get guys to fill in the gaps. So I think, like, I think you can do a sell job on casual fans. And look, we're not that far. When Nick Lofton's hitting good, Bobby Witt Jr., plus what, Salvador Perez, Vinny Pasquantino. Does that add up to a division-winning team in your mind? Like, is that, with no outfield?
Yeah, no, the central question to me of what happened here, why the Royals are 5-17. The question we have to ask ourselves is it a matter of coaching or is it a matter of talent? Because all winter, you and I went on and on about if there was an upside case here, it's that the coaching was bad. Now it's good. How much of a difference can they make? And for the first 2 weeks of the season, we had a lot of positive, feedback in terms of what we were seeing with the pitchers. That's fallen off. Meanwhile, the offense hasn't clicked from day one. That's, I think, to me, what really has made the season so exasperating and made me so despondent is that I really did not expect the hitting to be this bad. Right. The pitching, I mean, I think with the pitching, it is better. It's not good. It's not even average, but it's better. I don't think the coaching is, the coaching upgrade has hurt. I think it's helped. Maybe there's a limit to how much better it can be, especially when so many of the guys on the roster are veterans, are guys that, I don't expect them to make Zach Greinke better. Jordan Lyles is what he is. That's one of the reasons why I didn't want him in a Royals uniform. The issue with Jordan Lyles isn't that he's not pitching the way the Royals expected. It's that he is pitching the way the Royals expected. He went out today, give him 6 innings.
Yeah.
They lost because he gave up back-to-back home runs, but he's giving them innings. Okay, well, if that's what you want from Jordan Lyles, you got innings. And I guess when your pitching staff is this bad, maybe you need those innings, but it's not quality innings. So if by signing him, either you made a mistake because his innings aren't worth it, or if they are worth it, they're only worth it because you've done such a terrible job of developing pitching. But on the hitting side, I mean, the Royals are basically next to last or last in every offensive category. All right. The only team that's worse than them, generally speaking, in the American League are the Tigers. The Oakland A's, mind you, who are off to make one of the worst starts in Major League history. They have the worst run differential in modern Major League history after 22 games. I think they've been outscored by 105 runs. And yet they have a better offense than the Royals. The A's, mind you, have an ERA coming in today of 8.08. So that pitching staff doesn't look good. By the way, I bring this up only because I just want to ask you a really quick question. 19 guys have thrown a pitch for the Oakland A's this year. Do you want to guess who's the only one who hasn't given up an earned run?
A former Royal?
A former Royal.
I don't even know which one.
Richard Lovelady. I'm just going to leave that out there.
You're so. How did I not see that one?
I don't know.
From the Braves.
I got some feedback on Twitter when the Braves let him go, which again, part of my frustration was the Braves are such a great organization that the fact that they had room on their 40-man for him said something. They looked at him and said, "Okay, we've got a good roster. We don't have room for him on the 40-man." The A's, the worst team in baseball, said we do, and if he didn't get a chance with the A's, I was prepared to concede maybe he's just not a major leaguer. But he went straight to the major leagues. He was right on their 26-man roster. And look, he's thrown 3 1/3 innings. I'm not declaring victory by any means. I'm just pointing it out. We'll just put a pin in it. We'll come back to that at some point.
By the way, I think it was more like Ryan said. We made it a full 15 minutes before the Lovelady reference, a new record. It's really more like change.
Hey, somebody has to replace Jake Junis this year. Okay, might as well be this guy. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, but the offense, yeah, it's a disaster. So I almost feel like you have to stop thinking about what we're blowing up and start thinking about what are we keeping? What is the core here, right? And if there is one silver lining to the season, it's that the true core guys that you and I hope would be the center of that core have not been a huge disappointment. Bobby Witt, again, half step forward, not a full step yet, but he's not taken a step backwards, at least offensively, and probably not defensively. He might be building to something. I'm fine with how he's doing. Vinny, I love Vinny. He has not disappointed us. He is, I think, an absolute core member. And these are guys who can be the championship caliber starting players. They can be an everyday hitter in a lineup that goes to the playoffs, if not goes to a World Series. Melendez is the guy we're not sure about. today, I mean, look, today went about as well as any game that you score 3 runs in, right? Where the 3 core guys all homer, but nobody else does anything. He's still striking out too much, yes, but absolutely he should be continue to play, continue to get that opportunity. I'm not sure about anyone else. I mean, I've said some nice things about Kyle Isbell on this podcast. I'm gonna have to retract those for the time being. Maybe he's a 4th outfielder, but I want to believe in him so badly because if he can hit a little bit, his defense is so good. But you got to hit a little bit. Brett Phillips didn't hit a little bit, and Kyle Isbell isn't hitting a little bit, and at some point that matters. And then beyond
Let's
that,
dig into
on the roster. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but who else on the major league roster right now is a guy you see playing? Salvador Perez is Salvador Perez, but frankly, by the time this team is ready to contend, he's going to be like 36-year-old Salvador Perez. Is he going to be a solution? So they need to find at least six everyday players for their lineup.
Yeah. Red said Tampa's in the playoff most years and have a payroll significantly less than Kansas City. They also play in a dump. What does KC have to do? Why can't they do the same thing?
I have an answer agree. For that. I have an answer for that, I think, which is something I did not realize the extent of this. For all the things we talk about what the Rays do, the Rays have more analysts on their payroll by far than any team in baseball. The Royals, I believe, have 10 people listed in their directory in their R&D department, right? Which, having a 10-person R&D department even a decade ago would have made you maybe the deepest in of any organization. That's actually below average. Most teams are in the 15 to 20 range. The Rays have 35 full-time employees pouring over the data. 30. Yeah, like pouring over the data. That's, when 35, that's, and yet even 35 is probably, these guys probably average around $100,000 expense in terms of salary, benefits, etc. Maybe it's 50% more than that. Let's say it's 150. That's $5 million. Again, that's less than what Jordan Lyles is making. They have the biggest R&D department in the sport. They have the best team in the sport with the lowest payroll. I don't think it's a coincidence. Like, yes, it's great the Royals embrace data, but nobody does it better than Tampa Bay, and nobody gets more out of players that we talked about Jeffrey Springs, right? And he blew out his elbow, but like Jeffrey Springs was a nobody, was one of the most dominant pitchers in baseball between opening day of last year and when he blew out his elbow. And so maybe blowing out your elbow, this is the thing. Maybe it's the cost of doing business. It's an unfortunate reality. It's probably not a good thing for the sport that the best way to succeed as a team is to take a pitcher and basically push him to his limits. That's kind of the way I'm looking. I'm hoping that is what's happened with Kris Bubic, where, changing his repertoire, making him throw new pitches, maybe put some new stresses on his elbow, and may have cost him his Tommy John ligament. But you know what? I think Kris Bubic is still better off in the long term having Tommy John surgery and a new repertoire than having his old repertoire and a healthy elbow, because that obviously wasn't working. But the point is, the Rays look for every advantage, and they do it using data. And I think the Royals, that's one of the things going forward. We talk about blowing it up. One of the things they need to redo, they need to expand their R&D department.
I want to hit on a couple things here in the chat room. One, Kaufman City says, my company makes $20 million a year. We have 30 plus analysts. The Royals are valued as $1 billion company, which is a fine point. And then this one, how do the Royals not, this from Whiskey and Washers, how do the Royals not mimic everything the Rays do? I think that's a good question, and I think that's where they want to get. You can't do it like the regime change just came. Right. And I think it warrants, at least for me, not everybody has to have this opinion. It doesn't mean that they can't make serious moves before then, but I'm not going to pass any judgment on guys needing to be fired until we're 1 year in. It's going to be opening day. When I see the roster that hits opening day 24, then I will say, okay, either, we've gone through a trade deadline and entire winter meetings and off-season spring training, and this roster is unacceptable for where we are. They're not actually changing. It's just the same old, same old. I'll be ready to make that declaration when we get out of spring training in 24. In the meantime, I recognize this is a battleship and not a jet ski. It doesn't turn on a dime. It takes time. I got that, and I'm willing to be a little bit patient on it. and not even patient. I'm going to my wonderful internet there is a gem as always. As I've been, people who are familiar with my football podcast know I've gone round and round with my internet company, so I apologize for the glitches that are going on. Supposedly, people have been out here and it's going to get better, but maybe I don't know. Maybe I have the same analytics department as the Royals. But bottom trust me, that's been a fun conversation as well. But I think there does have to be a level of patience and wait for them to get around. But they can make changes along the way. I want to dig into one of the things that's there, Rany, that some of the folks have said on here, and that is, what about start moving guys around, right? Like, would this team look better if Bobby Witt Jr. When Drew Waters comes back? Somebody mentioned, what does an Isbell Waters Witt Jr. outfield look like? Does that get you feeling like if second half of the season, and I don't think Bobby Witt Jr. is going anywhere. I think they're giving him the entire year short. But if they did, and he was out in the outfield, and Drew Waters was back, and your infield had Nick Lofton and Nicky Lopez, and and they're at least survival hitting numbers that are out there. How encouraged would you be that at least the defense would get better, and Jordan Lyles and Zach Greinke outings would look a lot better because they're catching the ball?
Look, how I have been an advocate of Bobby Witt playing anywhere other than shortstop for a long time. And even I think that moving him for that reason, I think is just it's a panic move, and it's you're making the move for the wrong reasons. I mean, if you want a great outfield defense, you can have that right now with Nate Eaton, Jackie Bradley Jr., and Isbell. Like, that's actually a really good defensive outfield. It doesn't hit, and it has no hope of hitting in the future. Like, the point here, if we're trying to find long-term solutions, the only reason to move Bobby Witt from where he is now, because if you want to find out if he can play shortstop, even if he is not good at it, you want to give it a full year. At this point, have at it. Like this, if there's one luxury of being 5-17, it's that you already know that you're not playing for anything this year except future development. So let's get as many answers to as many questions as we can this year. So let's keep Bobby Witt at shortstop, unless you simply have so many people capable of playing the infield and hitting that you just don't have room for Bobby Witt on the infield. Like that's a problem you solve when you have too much talent. If there's one thing the Royals don't have right now, it's too much talent. So if Drew Waters comes back, that's great. You can play him in center or play him in right and move Melendez to left. But right now you have Nate Eaton and Jackie Bradley Jr. on the roster. Like, I don't think there's going to be problem finding an outfield spot for Drew Waters. And that's actually one of the things you talk about blowing up. I don't know. It might be too early to blow it up in terms of making trades. It's very rare, although not unheard of, to make trades now. And my God, if you can get Aroldis Chapman to waive the rule that allows him to not be traded until June 15th, if he's willing to move now, and I have to assume he wants to play for a contender, if you can get him to do that now, my God, you should be blowing up the phone lines right now, because that dude has some value. And, I'll admit, I was wrong. He's throwing 103 again. He looks amazing. He's dominating out there. You think about what the Cubs gave up to get him mid-season 7 years ago. You may not get that package, but you can get something for Aroldis Chapman. But the sooner you do it, the more value he's going to have. But what I think is really telling about this team, the worst, the huge disappointment at the offense is second worst offense in the American League. Of the 13 guys who they broke camp with, do you know how many of them have been optioned to the minors? 0. The only 2 transactions they made on the hitting side have been when Franmil Reyes and who was the other one who had a child? Was it Dozier? I think it might have been Hunter. Right? We've had 2 paternity list moves, which got Nick Prado up to the majors for a few days, and then Freddie Fermin played catcher today. They have not optioned anyone to the minor leagues. Like, I'm sorry, Nate Eaton is 1 for 25 with no walks and 13 strikeouts. Michael Massey had a couple of hits today, so I guess he's saved his job. Came in today hitting 115, no walks, 21 strikeouts. Are you telling me that the Omaha is so bereft of talent that you can't find somebody to play those positions? No. And Omaha, there are some decent prospects who are hitting decently well, you do something.
Well, let's shift gears and talk about Matt Quatraro. First of all, I'll tell you we're brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. If you've got parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear since 1994. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Call them today at 816-484-3338 if you've got any questions about your parking lot, any problems you might have with your parking lot. Again, Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best. One contractor, all things parking lot. Is Matt Quatraro in over his head? Like to your point about like, okay, nobody's hitting. Why aren't we seeing movement? What if his purpose, one of the things he said was, listen, no one's going anywhere for 40 games, right? Like we understand there are ups and downs and we're not going to panic. We understand the season's long and we're not going to, overreact to 13, 14 games. One of the things about Kyle Isbell made the team, what was it last year, right? He made the team. Mike Matheny bragged him up and then he didn't play at all. He just sat there watching. We sat here going, what was the point? Why is he there? Well, now they're playing. And isn't that like we sit here and complain that there's not production, but isn't this year, if it's not going to be a contending year, which we didn't think it was, we had them at 77 wins each. How foolish that looks now, by the way, just to hear it coming out of my mouth. But, it was let's find things out. Let's find out if Bobby Witt can play shortstop. Let's find out if Kyle Isbell can play center field. Like what you don't want to do is send a guy down. Now, listen, I get your point. You can send a guy down for 2 weeks, a month, 6 weeks, let him find himself, bring him back up. Still plenty of time to hopefully find out what he is. But if what they wanted to do was say, listen, we're going to let you work through some problems. Everybody gets a month. Everybody gets 40 games. That's the actions of a reasonable man, is it not?
No, I think it is. I mean, and you made the point. This is a battleship. It's going to take some time to turn, and it's really unfair to make any decisions in less than a year. And if that applies to J.J. Piccolo, who's been in the organization for 15 years before this, it absolutely applies to Quatraro, who's brand new to the Royals, right? And so I'm not making any judgments on him now. And the reality is, when you're 5-17, everything you do looks bad. Like we're going to take the the worst possible interpretation of what he says. So the fact that he is much more laid back than Mike Matheny, the fact that he's much more positive and seems to be not panicking at all. If the Royals were at 500, we'd be like, this is exactly what the Royals needed. He's taking the pressure off of the team. But instead, because they're 5-17, we're interpreting it as he doesn't seem to care. He doesn't have any sense of urgency, right? Like it's probably unfair to judge him based on a 5-17 record. I think that his comments about maybe we should have pulled Kris Bubic out of the game earlier, that rubbed me the wrong way. I think it's very interesting. MJ Melendez came out of today's game, middle of the game, which was scary, and they said afterwards he had a lower back strain. It sounds to me like it was pretty precautionary. I'm really hoping if he gets back out there in the next day or two, that may be a sign that they realized, we cannot take any chance of injury with any of these guys, and to be a little more proactive about keeping guys healthy. But I am a tiny bit concerned about Quatraro. I'm not going to lie to you, because we were both very positive about him. But you would like to think there would be some results by now. They lost 7 in a row. They come out yesterday and they blow a lead, and they're down. They blow a lead, then they tie it up. Then they're down 2 in the top of the 9th, and they have a 5-run rally. And you're thinking, okay, this is a really good sign. And then they come out today and they're flat again. I mean, some of that is momentum is tomorrow's starting pitcher, and Jordan Lyles started today, and there's not much you can do to overcome that. But at some point, you want to see a little bit of a spark. The best managers are able to balance intensity with being laid back. I mean, and you know what? Who was actually, I think, really good at maintaining the proper tone was Ned Yost. I actually think that Ned Yost could be a red ass when he needed to be, but also gave the players autonomy, when it wasn't, most of the time, when it wasn't crucial for him to be hard up on them. And Mike Matheny was always set too intense. We're seeing Quatraro dial to much more laid back, but the most successful managers are able to switch that dial back and forth as the need arises. And so I do think we need to see that. We need to see that sense of intensity from Quatraro here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Although I don't know what are you going to get intense about. I mean, they're so buried. I think it may come across as false bravado, but
and that's what Quatraro has said himself. And I'll give him credit for being true to himself. But when you're 5-17, it's okay to show a little more emotion.
I'm big in Japan. One of the regulars says, we asked for someone not like Matheny. Now we want more like Matheny, which is a fair point. I think Kellen said, God help me, I miss Nedyo so much, which is something I think some people thought maybe they wouldn't. Listen, let me just answer the question. Is Quatraro in over his head? Or can I say right now that he's in over his head? No, I like what you said. There are some things that are concerning, but what I'm concerned about is something that I was concerned about when I was at spring training. I've never seen a manager like him. Right? Now, that's not to say that he's not speaking a foreign tongue. He's they're not. He's not lighting candles and having seances. He's so calm and like I'm not shocked that we're not seeing him. I mean, he just is there's he doesn't bring a presence like Mike Matheny brings kind of a linebacker presence. He's a big strapping guy and he played the game and he got in people's faces, so it's there. Matt Quatraro didn't play the game, right? Not at the highest level, right? I don't think so. I'm not mistaken about that, right? He didn't make it to the big leagues.
Quatraro, I know. I think he played in the minors as a kid.
Yeah, played in the minors. And so there's no memories of fights or charging the mound or anything that shows that side to him. So I'm not surprised that this is where we sit, but I don't know if he's either the perfect guy because they knew this is going to be rough, right? And we need a guy who's going to be calm and not freak these kids out. But we're going to find out. I come back to what I think this year is. If this year is to find out what guys are, jumping their crap all the time, I don't think helps. And so if he's the steadying hand, I'm okay with that. If he's going to be the analytics guy, somebody said a long time ago, we've had so many great comments in the chat room. I don't know how far back I'd have to go to find it, but that, talked about that Saturday's game. Quatraro was really good at going through the bullpen. Number one, Aroldis Chapman wasn't just sitting out there watching a critical moment of the game. He was brought in
the seventh time. No, that's a good point, because I'm one of the things when we talked about Chapman signing originally that I was not one of the reasons I was down on it was that I was under the clearly mistaken impression that bringing him in meant that he was going to have to be the closer and that he was going to have to be used in ninth inning situation that would handcuff the team, especially given that as a lefty, there's a lot of sort of utility in being able to use him as the moment dictates, as the opposing lineup dictates, instead of what the inning is. But it turns out they've used him in the eighth inning a ton, and in that game, I believe he pitched the seventh inning. And the problem was that Quas gave up the go-ahead homer in the eighth, but Aroldis Chapman, I'm shocked that he is happy to pitch the seventh inning. The Royals are using him that way. So no, the way Quatraro is tactically managing, he's what was advertised, which is exactly what we wanted. You said you've never seen anyone like him. I mean, given the history of Royals managers, that's a good thing. That's what we wanted, right? It's just a matter of does their record at this point justify a little bit more fiery intensity? I'd just like to see him show that he has that tool in his tool belt.
He barked a little bit. There was a call. I don't remember if it was Friday night. I think it was Friday night. There was a call he didn't like. He barked over a little bit. I kind of wondered. I mean, I think at some point we are going to have to see him come out and go at an umpire and get in their face. I think, I get it. That is part of the job. Whether, the basketball coach that gets thrown out of the game to fire his team up and show that he's going to fight for him, that he cares about him. Somebody else mentioned about, at least Mike Matheny would go out there and back his guys. Quatraro just sat there. Let me see. There may have been a reason why he wasn't backing him. He told the guy, don't do this because this will happen. And I'm not going to run out there and play nursemaid to you because you did something I told you not to do. Let's watch and see if he doesn't come out at some point. But I mean, one of the things we were discussing that we would talk about tonight is it coaching or talent? let me get right. It's talent, right? Like,
And I think that's the thing. Ultimately, I don't want to punish him for the sins
yes,
of not to be blunt, the guys above him on the pecking order, right? Because I think that's what this is. I think that this is a talent issue. As much as we didn't think this team was great, we still overrated the talent. And that's the question I have now about, at the end of the year is, are we saying goodbye to JJ Piccolo, or are we going to be advocating for them, the Royals to say goodbye? They need to show that they can bring in talent, because while the coaching has been overhauled, the people selecting the talent, the draft, obviously free agency, etc., that did not change much this offseason. And if the talent is this bad, maybe the problem isn't the people selecting that talent. And so, I mean, I feel like what we see in the minor leagues this year is extremely important. What we see out of this year's draft is extremely important, because if things do not progress there, better than they have so far in April, I think that's going to be the strongest case anyone can make for it's time to blow up the front office, not just the roster, but the people who put that roster together in the first place.
yeah, I wholeheartedly get that for sure. By the way, Rany becoming the most popular man on earth right now. Holy crap! Nail, hammer, head, preach, Rany.
Apparently, we have found the one thing that our listeners agree with the most
Yes,
unanimously across the board. So
Matt's all over it. Benny's all over it. Look, and I do get it. Let me pose, and I didn't talk to you about this. People don't. Rany and I will go over a couple of things that we're going to talk about. We don't. Rany loves to throw curveballs. First of all, he loves to I want to talk about this, but he wants like a genuine response. Well, I was like, okay, I'll do that. So this is a time that Rany and I didn't talk about this, but I had it on my list of things to get to in this subject matter, and that is
my turn to swing at a curveball. Okay.
Yeah, mine is this. What if this is the plan? Right? This is tanking. What if this is what it looks like? Because if when people say you can't tank with a modern team, that you got to preach winning, and I always end up at just losing my mind over. No, you don't ask players to go out on the field and not perform. You can't do it. You don't put bad lineups out there. That's not what less than what you're capable of. What you do is strip it of talent. What if John Sherman, JJ Piccolo, Matt Quatraro all sat down and all agreed team's not there. We're really at ground zero. Actually, we're about a step away from ground zero because we're going to trade off everything we sign and a couple of guys that are here that we can, and we're going to move them all. And this is what we did in Tampa originally to get it going. And at least this is what I've been told about. This is what they did in Cleveland. This is how it's done. And don't worry, I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to freak out. You're not going to hear me jousting with the reporters. There's 5 in there, for God's sake. I'm not going to go out and blow up on the field. I understand we're going to lose 100 plus games, but the only way we're going to get out of this is to get a lot of high draft picks, to hit well, to get the talent, to get the farm system built up, and this is where it begins. And we're all big boys, and we understand what it is. What if what we're talking about, the blowing it up, has already begun? And this is the plan. Because if you were going to ask me, how would you tank with the Royals? Well, I know I've got a substandard shortstop that I think I probably want to move to the outfield. But he doesn't want to, and I can't sign him like that. So let's let him play there. Nobody's going to question what we're doing. He was drafted to play shortstop. Let's do that. We've got some good defensive pieces, but we're neither going to play all the defensive pieces, but we're also not going to play all the offensive pieces. And we're going to ride this thing, and we're going to tank. And along the way, if we're not where we need to be to maximize our returns on the draft, we're going to trade everything we can along the way. And this is a team that sees the bigger picture of tanking. Will say the right things. If an owner that's behind them, and this is what they're doing.
So, Ren, that is definitely a curveball. I think it's a hanging curveball. And I'm gonna smack it because, man, I would love for that. If that were the plan, I would actually be kind of delighted that the Royals were that devious and thinking that long term. I don't see it, Matt. For one thing, if that were the case, they would have traded Scott Barlow this winter. All right, look, we've talked about this so many times with the Royals holding on to players, going back to Joakim Soria all the way to Whit Merrifield last year, holding on to players that had value for other teams who were trying to contend, and the Royals were not, and they waited too long. And it looks like one of the things I wanted to really rag on them was it looks like they waited too long at Scott Barlow. And I can't blame J.J. Piccolo for not trading him at the trade deadline last year because Dayton was still in charge. Right. And it's just like it was one last reminder that Dayton Moore would not learn from his mistakes, that he had an incredibly valuable trade asset, an excellent reliever with 2.5 years of club control, and didn't trade him. But JJ could have traded him this winter. If you're tanking, what on earth are you keeping Scott Barlow for? Scott Barlow has been a big disappointment this month.
I will grant you that. Why not trade him? But and I got an easy answer to debunk that one. But there are two good theories that have been posted that I want to highlight that are actually harder for me to debunk. And by the way, I am not saying this is a fact. I'm offering it up as a possibility. Okay,
I would love for it to be true. I just don't think I don't think it's true.
I'm always mesmerized by how asking questions and probing and you suddenly becomes your mantra, your theory, my mantra, my theory. Here's where it's easy to debunk the Barlow question. They didn't get enough. Somebody's got to be there to trade with him. Like, first of all, I don't think Scott Barlow's a closer, right? So, like, what did you think you were going to get? So if their idea was we'll put him together with Aroldis Chapman, we'll get him going, and we'll be able to get more. Like, they didn't get the offer they wanted, right? And maybe they made a mistake. They overvalued him. I'm all for that. But I think that's an easy one to get around because everyone always wants to trade, right? We've got the NFL draft coming to Kansas City. It's trade up, trade down. Listen, I've had the conversations with guys night of where it's like, well, did you try to trade down? Yeah. You know what? We had crickets, right? We had people on the phone, but when the quarterback went, I go back to, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that draft pick. They would have loved to have traded down that year. Once Jordan Love went off the board, nobody was calling because everybody recognized it's a bunch of guys that we don't really care if we pick 20 or we pick 60. They're all the same guys, so we're not moving up, right? So I've been around enough to know that just a one guy trade thing can't debunk it. Here's what does blow it up. Here is the problem, and this is, unless somebody can help me out, and that is, hang on, I got to go back. You're chiming in too much, people. Somebody said basically, well, why are we talking about a stadium then? Well, here it is. It was Tony. Tony said, would we be talking about a new stadium then? I don't have a good one for that. That's the one that really blows this theory up, because unless it's like, listen, we've said all along, what is 2026? Like what? Like, it's been preposterous. I don't know how a talk show fatty can know that your timeline, at least that's being leaked out. John Sherman's never said, he'd say, yeah, we'd love to have it be open by 26, but he's never said if this is going to be open by 26. And we're going to get it on the ballot by April, August at the latest. We'd like to get it on there. We'd like to. Maybe those are trial balloons too. Let's see how it is. That is a tough one. I don't have a great one. The one I can debunk is the one where Mark said, okay, what if they're just really bad at all of it? Well, so what's the difference between that and being good at being bad? Either way, you're bad, right? Like, that was the problem when Dayton Moore entered into the rebuild. In 18 was he grabbed some guys to try to not bottom out and then still bottomed out. And he didn't go, okay, screw it, that doesn't work. Let me tank. Let's put it into action and trade guys off. No, he kept trying to keep from bottoming out. And then he lost another 100 games, right? Either way, irrelevant. If you're tanking, you're trying to be bad. It doesn't matter. And if they didn't, then hopefully this light bulb will come on. Okay, here we are, right? Like,
well, so that's the difference between being good at being bad and being bad at being bad. The guys who were good at being bad understood that tanking means you don't hold back, right? Dayton you can't half-ass tanking by definition. And the Royals have always half-assed it because they were never willing to strip it down to the studs. And, it's another one of those things where Dayton was right on the merits of the strategy, but he was wrong on the value. He was right that baseball is a better sport when you don't tank, but it's not his job to make baseball a better sport.
Right.
That is the commissioner's job. Just like it's not a baseball team's responsibility to make their pitchers throw pitches quickly. If there's a competitive advantage to taking 30 seconds between pitches, then you do that. And that's how we ended up with 3.5-hour games. It's the commissioner's job to make the game itself look better. They finally did that this winter to enormous effect and enormous, I think, applause from almost every corner. And I'm hoping that that will embolden them to do more. But the point is, you got to separate those things out. Dayton was thinking like a commissioner. Like Dayton would be a great guy to be an ambassador for the sport, but his approach to tanking, right? He didn't like that term, and he wasn't willing to do it. Now, the thing is, the sport has made some changes about to make tanking less valuable as well, because now you're not guaranteed the first pick in the draft if you suck, right? Like there is a draft lottery. Kind of screwed over the Royals last year, but I do like the fact now that I'll tell you, in previous years, I would already be as a fan, I would already be in the mode of, okay, we got to keep losing going because I really want the number one pick. And I don't feel quite that way this year because it's not guaranteed to get the number one pick if the Royals, up with the way the A's are playing, they're not going to be the worst team anyway. But the point is, your draft slot is not quite as tied to your record.
Right,
so I don't think
Curtis just said in the chat room is that like, hey, it's a draft lottery, but still
right. It does reduce the value. It's still obviously
it does reduce the value, but there's still no, as long as there's a draft and losers pick higher than winners on whole, you have no choice. It's why I think the lottery, all it does is make it harder for teams to get out of the hole. That's all it does. It affects ultimately, that's all it will do. Once heads are pulled from asses and everyone recognizes, as long as you're going to, incentivize losing by rewarding with more assets, you have
but there's I do think limiting it somewhat is helpful. And I'll tell you why. Look at the Oakland A's, which are, you're a team that is deliberately, they're not playing bad to get a number one draft pick. They're playing bad so they can move the hell out of Oakland and go to Las Vegas. It's just such a cynical ploy by that entire organization right now. I feel bad for their players. I feel terrible for their fans. I kind of like the fact that, you know what, they may not be rewarded with the number one pick, because when you are sending a gigantic middle finger to the sport and saying, we don't care if we win, what's the point of watching an A's game? What's the point if your
point
team,
of watching a Royals game, Rany?
And at least there's a difference between trying. Yes, they're trying and failing.
For the old college effort? Come on.
I don't know, man. The A's have like 3 major league pitchers on their roster. It's just it's embarrassing. And again, the point is, they don't want to win. Yes, the Royals, it's pathetic that they're trying and still failing, but at least they're trying. I'm just saying, I think there's some value. Huh?
That's worse.
It's worse in terms of competence, but at least as a fan, the one thing that I want to know when I watch a sporting event is that both teams are trying their best. This is why the Black Sox scandal was such a potentially catastrophic event for the sport, that they brought the hammer down on anybody having a whiff of gambling for 100 years. Now it's a free for all, but for 100 years they stamped that down. Because if I go to a game and I know that both teams aren't trying, it's not a sport anymore. It's WWE. It's like practically staged. So I'm fine with the fact that they have reduced. Yes, you're right. They cannot eliminate it entirely. Bad teams always have higher picks. They should have higher picks, but you got to reduce the incentives a little bit. Look at the NBA. Look at the end of the NBA season this year. How many players were, healthy scratches and not playing? It was just it became a kind of an embarrassment to the sport.
Well, then you're pro the Jordan Lyles signing, right?
If he didn't get 2 years and $17 million, if he had gotten the Ryan Yarbrough contract, yeah, I would have been fine with it.
But they're better with him than without him, and that's not tanking.
Well, it's right. I think
Royals, you're for that contract, which we know you're not. Which is where I had the problem. It's like the selective.
There is a price at the right price. Yes, if he makes the Royals 0.1 wins better, then he makes them better. I'm not paying $17 million for a guy to make my team 0.1 wins better. That was the problem it was the money and the years.
but they have the money. There's no problem with
I would rather them spend that money on making a 35-man analytics department than on 4 months of Jordan Lyles' contract.
Well, they can do both.
It's a matter of they could.
So they're not connected. That's my point. That's it. Is like we bitch because it's not the move we wanted them to make. The overall philosophical point: tanking works. It works. It's worked for every franchise that has done it right. It works. It's the most logical way because we have watched time and time an empty Kauffman Stadium. If you're not winning, nobody gives a crap that you gave it kind of a try. 75 wins isn't going to get many more people to the ballpark unless it all comes at the very beginning and they just tank out at the end when the kids go back to school. It's not going to.
Has it worked for the Tigers? Because they're the most recent team to do it, and with multiple top 3 picks. And I'm not sure they're even as bad as the Royals have been.
No, there's no guarantee. But has not tanking worked for the Royals?
That's a different issue. Yes, you're absolutely right. This is what makes being a Royals fan so frustrating.
If you suck at drafting,
suck
at drafting, why wouldn't you do everything you can to pick as high as possible to eliminate as much, variance of error as you possibly could?
If you suck at drafting, the solution, yes, it's great to draft higher no matter what. But if you suck at drafting, the solution is get better drafters.
Yeah, but that's always the solution. But you just said, yes, it gets better when you pick higher. You even said it before you even said
How much higher do you want the Royals to pick?
Number one. I want them to pick number 1.
Who would they have taken the year they took they took Asa Lacy with the number 4 pick? Who would they have taken if they had the number 1?
Randy, you can isolate and pick.
I'm just giving you one example. If they had Bobby Witt, they would have taken Bobby Witt number 1 or number 2.
There is no bigger drop off than from pick 1 to pick 2. None. There's none. There's no bigger drop off.
I 100% agree with that.
So then, done, over. That's it. Here ended the lesson.
The point is that you're saying, well, not tanking hasn't worked for the Royals. But you know what? Not tanking has worked for so many other teams because they're run more competently and they draft better.
How did it work for the Astros?
We talked about how the Astros were the original tanker, and as the first.
How did it work?
It worked. The thing is, they are the reason why everybody wants to tank because it worked so well for them. But you know what? They also got really lucky because they
No, they didn't. They did not get really lucky. They have all kinds of bad high picks. They didn't just have
they
one.
Drafted Brady, but I know they drafted Brady Aiken and then didn't sign him because he failed his pre-draft physical. It was a stupid pick, high school pitcher.
Yes, it was a bad pick.
But they got a compensation pick because they didn't sign him. Got Alex Bregman the following year.
Royals would get to if they made a bad pick and didn't sign him as well. Brady Aiken gave them nothing. Mark Appel gave them nothing. You cannot deny that.
Of course, tanking can work. It doesn't work as well now because they've changed the draft rules, and it takes forever. And the fact that we are talking about tanking now, 8 years after they've had a winning record. Ultimately, what are we arguing about? You want them to tank now? Okay, let's do it. That's not the plan. That's the point. The problem isn't that the Royals, are or are not tanking. The problem is that 8 years after they last had a winning record, that you and I are having a debate as to they're so bad that you and I are debating as to whether or not they meant to tank this year or not.
I offered up as a possibility. Yes, they're so bad, but there's no reason not to line up all your resources. I don't understand how you can want them to spend all the money, but not get all the draft picks. That makes no sense to me. And it's just it's this.
Let's find some common ground then. This year, yeah, let's tank. It's to the degree that you can tank between in mid-season between now and the end of the year. Any asset that you have, sell it off. Absolutely. I'm all on board with that.
And I'm sure Gann is thrilled to sponsor this conversation. By the way, they're doing very well. They are not tanking. One of the fastest
Do
growing
they build tanks? No, I don't think they make tanks out of asphalt. So
No. One of the fastest growing companies in Kansas City is now hiring all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based upon experience, paid time off, and insurance. Yep, those are just a couple of the benefits you can get. Check them out online at ganasphalt.com for more info. Make sure you tell them you heard about them here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. Let's talk about Kris Bubic. I mean, is there anything to be said? A year of service time now to be accrued. I expect him back after the All-Star break next year.
I think All-Star break is what I'm hoping for. Like, that's my goal, right? Like, you used to see guys come back in 12 months, but it seems like nowadays it's more like 14 or 15 at the minimum. So if he's back next July, we get half a season out of him, I would take that.
And do you think that you're going to see any kind of, is this it? It was he had to put so much stress on his arm to be the pitcher that he is that we'll go back to seeing mediocrity? Or do you have optimism that no, he's got a new repertoire, this was going to happen anyway, and now the repertoire can still work after Tommy John?
I do think that, having a new repertoire puts like an immediate stress on the elbow that could have precipitated the snap. But I actually think that once, there was already damage there, and that's almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. I would like to think that with year of rehab time, there's no reason he can't go back to using his new repertoire and not have the risk of it breaking off right away. It's very rare. It does happen that pitchers, their Tommy John fails and they have to have another one. But I know of no evidence that a guy throwing new pitches, once his elbow has been reconstructed, that he can't use those pitches or his elbow will tear again. But the only honest answer about what I expect from him is I have absolutely no idea. I mean, at least there is a possible upside now. Like if he had blown it out in spring training, you and I would be like, well, why even keep this guy around? He never shown he could pitch at the major league level, and now he's hurt. Now that he has shown, even if it's very brief, we are going to hope for the best, give him that opportunity. But I have no idea what to expect when he comes back.
Yeah. We can only hope that it's a successful surgery and the repertoire that he has is one that he can maintain when he does come back. But I use the term heartbreaking. I still stand by that because that was the one really big positive.
Yeah.
Now, to come from nowhere, Vinny Pasquantino's a positive. Bobby Witt Jr. and Jim Melendez are showing signs. We had a couple people a long time ago in the chat talk about, hey, there was things to like use. We were talking about some good things that we were seeing out of the pitching a couple of weeks ago. So let's see what happens when they start to turn the corner. Let's finish with your minor league minute. Who would you like to highlight?
Yeah, so we're gonna do a little bit different today. Some names I'm not sure I've really mentioned on this podcast at all, but I want to highlight the bigger issue, which we just talked about, the whole issue of coaching versus talent. And you talk about tanking. Let's tie it all together, because tanking only works if you use those draft picks wisely. And that only happens if you are able to identify talent and develop it, right? One of the commenters made the point that, at the same time that the Astros were tanking, they also completely overhauled their analytics at a time where most teams didn't really have a big analytics department. They were hiring guys right and left. Several of my Baseball Prospectus colleagues were there, so that when they did have those draft picks, they were really smart about using them. One of the smartest things I think any team has done in the last 10, 15 years in the draft was when they took Carlos Correa with the number 1 overall pick, when he wasn't a number 1 talent, because he was only he was underrated because he was only 17 years old out of high school. And I had done some research that showed the importance of draft age, and that 17-year-old high school draftees tend to vastly outperform their draft position. And I know that was a factor in the Astros. That information, that study, was a factor in what the Astros did. That they had that information as well, and that they were able to cut a pre-draft deal, save a lot of money in Korea, take that money, give that money to their second-round pick, Lance McCullers, and had a phenomenal draft. The point is, tanking's great, but you've got to draft and develop better. And that is where we've seen the Royals fall short so many times, especially in those mid-round picks. The Guardians today, they brought up Logan Allen, who's like one of their top prospects, and I think he was I want to say he might have been a second round pick. So they've got some great pitching prospects in the minor leagues, top 100 guys. Tanner Beebe, who's like I think it was a 5th round pick. There's another guy. Like the point is, the Guardians strategy. You look at Shane Bieber, their strategy from the 2nd to the 5th round, they're drafting all these college pitchers that don't have the 1st round pedigree of an Asa Lacy, the dominant stuff, but somehow they come out and they outperform all the Royals' 1st round picks who are pitchers. And I can't even say, the Royals should have drafted their guys, because I don't think that if the Royals had drafted the guys the Guardians drafted, that they would be the prospects that they are. They take those pitchers, they make them better. So why am I saying all this? My hope is last year's draft, we've talked about Gavin Cross and Caden Wallace a lot. And it was a good sign that they both started in high A ball. You expect your 1st rounder to start in high A ball. 2nd rounder, not necessarily. And Caden Wallace has actually been better. Gavin Cross he's been striking out a little too much. Caden Wallace has been very good at playing third base, and he's got an OBP over 400. But the Royals' 3rd round pick last year is a pitcher named Mason Barnett, college pitcher out of, I think, Alabama. He was a 3rd round pick. Do you know where he ranked on Baseball America's top draft prospects before the draft? He ranked 383rd. And the Royals do this. They've been doing this for years, taking guys in the early mid rounds, the 2nd to 5th rounds, who by the Bible of the sport, Baseball America, you use MLB Pipeline, whatever, are rated by the industry much, much lower. And generally speaking, when the Royals go off the board and do something like that, it doesn't end well. Generally, the consensus is proven
Hunter
right.
Dozier.
Hunter Dozier would be. Hunter Dozier is complicated a little because it was it was for slot money and they used it on Sean Manaea. But that's
Junis.
Sorry,
Jacob Junis.
Jacob Junis was good because they spent the money on him late in the draft, right? But they that was a year where they also took, like, I think that was the Bubba Starling draft. They spent more money in that draft than I think any other draft they've ever had. And Jake Junis might have been the best player they got out of it. So when they took Mason Barnett, this Alabama pitcher didn't pitch particularly well in college, who was rated as basically a 12th or 13th round talent, not even a top 10 round talent. I'm thinking more of the same here. And he was the one pick that really stood out to me. It's like, geez, why did the Royals take this guy? Then he went out late in the season, made his pro debut, faced 24 batters. I believe 2 of them reached base, and he struck out 12 of them. That caught my eye. Okay, it's only 8 innings, but he struck out half the batters he faced. Okay, maybe there's something here. Well, Mason Barnett also started the year in high A ball. And in his first start, let me pull up his game logs now. His first start this year, 6 innings, 2 hits, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. Second start, 5 innings, 1 hit, 4 walks, 7 strikeouts. And then he started today, 5 innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. In 16 innings, he's given up 5 hits, none of them homers. He's walked 8, but he struck out 19. In high A ball, that is the kind of start when you look at some of the Guardians or Rays pitchers that come out of the draft, taken in the 3rd or 4th round. The following year, they're already in high A ball, but they get to Double A by midseason, and by the end of the year, they're being talked about on top 100 prospects list. I don't know that Mason Barnett will be that guy, but that is the kind of pick the Royals need to make. Mason Barnett is a guy I'm really watching the rest of the year, because if the Royals can prove that they can buck the consensus and find a diamond in the rough, that might give me a little bit more hope that they can start finding talent where they haven't before.
Does the fact that he's 22 and will be 23 soon after the season's over and he's pitching an A ball concern you at all?
College pitchers, that's what they are. They're going to be 20. That's why they have to really perform from their first full pro season. If he gets to Double A and is pitching well in Double A by the end of the year, I mean, once you're pitching well in Double A, you're, basically one good start away from being called to the major leagues. You're ready to go. Their 4th round pick last year, a guy named Steven Zobak. I'm just going to mention him really quickly. He was drafted as a reliever. I don't know if you've seen his numbers this year. He's faced 16 batters this year. He's in low A ball. and he's a reliever. So I wouldn't bring him up if it wasn't spectacular, but it's spectacular. 16 batters. He struck out 14 of them. 5 innings, 1 single, 1 non-strikeout out, and 14 whiffs. So
you're an amazing contradiction in terms, because you talk age and then you bring up 2 guys that are old for their
age
level.
is important for hitters. It's not nearly as important for
Okay.
pitchers. That's the big thing.
He's 22 years old in low A.
Well, again, these are college guys, right? But more and more, the smart teams more and more are just saying, the hell with high school pitchers. Let college weed out which of these guys can stay healthy, which of these guys will actually develop their stuff. Let's watch them at the college level. And what we're seeing also is that these teams with large R&D departments are getting data on college pitchers that was unthinkable 10 years ago. I mean, I remember when, someone like Steven Strasburg was coming out of the draft, and we were like excited to be able to have park effects and know, well, we got to take into account his home ballpark. Now you've got, college pitchers, the data they have on these guys is almost StatCast quality. They have the spin rates and the velocities, and so they can sort of figure out which pitchers can be molded into something better than themselves. And they do a really good job with it. That's what I'm hoping. That's why the fact that Barnett was not highly touted and is pitching well makes me hopeful. Maybe the Royals saw something in him that they could improve upon. And if they're doing it, then that gives me hope that maybe they actually deep down, they do know what they're doing.
All right. Let me run this by you. And I will take less than a minute. How about this? AAA ages. You ready?
Okay.
Here's the AAA roster. Just going to give you ages. 26, 30, 25, 28, 28, 23, 24, 24, 27, 24, 27, 24. Those are the hitters. The pitchers, 24, 26, 26, 26, 26, 29, 26, 31, 27, 25, 26, 27, 29, 30, 26, 32.
That is the roster of a team that has some promising hitters and no promising pitchers. Like, that's actually not that. If you look at most AAA teams, there's going to be a lot of guys around, on the wrong side of 30. Not everybody in AAA is going to be a prospect. The important thing to me is that the hitters are a lot younger than the pitchers there. You got a lot of 24-year-olds there, right? You got the Nick Loftons and the Michael Garcias and even the Nick Prado and Samad Taylor and some of these other guys. Those are guys young enough to be prospects. The pitching staff, they are who they are. I mean, unfortunately, most of those guys are there to fill out a roster, and the talent that the Royals do have on the pitching side is almost all, a double A or below. So, let's talk about the ages of, Frank Mazzucato as, 19 years old and pitching well. That's the hope that I have. The AAA, there's no hope on that AAA pitching staff.
And what is Michael Garcia when his career is over? Give me a comp of a player.
I mean, it's funny, but his cousin Alcides Escobar might be a good comp, hopefully with a little bit more plate discipline.
What's the comp on Nick Lofton?
His upside is a Whit Merrifield, maybe not quite that good, but Merrifield at his peak was a really, really good player, so close to that.
What's the comp on Samad Taylor?
Samad Taylor, I just see him as a really good utility guy. I don't know if I can. And you don't think of comps for that.
And that's it. That's the 24-year-olds. I mean, Tyler Gentry. What's the comp on Tyler Gentry?
Tyler Gentry, if he can maintain his batting average, because he was a 300, 320 hitter last year in the minors. I'm trying to think of who's a league average right fielder. Who is it? The Mariners. Who is it that the Mariners signed that I wanted the Royals to get? They're just
Conforto? Or no, he was the Giants.
No, Conforto. Yeah, Conforto. He's different. He's a lefty too. But I'm thinking of a league average right fielder type. But again, this is like best case scenario. Obviously, not all these guys are going to do it. It's the Royals, so probably none of them will do it. But
right.
I can't think of the name. Just let's just say league average right fielder. How's that?
Okay. AJ Pollock.
Teoscar Hernandez. No, I'm looking at the roster. Maybe it was. I think he was on the Mariners last year, and I don't think we need to waste time. Jog Rany's memory segment of the podcast might not work. Mitch Haniger. There we go. Mitch Haniger. I had to look it up. Yes, is that best case scenario? Mitch Haniger.
There it is. All right. Well, we'll see. I'm not quite as optimistic. I don't hear. I don't see where Alcides Escobar hitting the roster is like really what this roster is just waiting for.
Look,
Um,
I'm inclined to agree with you. We need more talent,
yeah.
and maybe some of it's in the lower minor leagues, but if we don't, if by the end of this year we don't have a top 10 farm system, and the team loses another 95 or 100 games, yeah, I think John Sherman needs to decide: is Jay Chipicolo, is the same front office minus Dayton Moore that has been there for the last 16 years, are they really the team that's the team of guys that is going to be able to find the talent necessary to build a playoff team?
Well, I'll disagree with you when you say we need talent. You and I don't have talent. That's not going to happen. The Royals need talent. The Kansas City Royals need a lot.
I don't know. I could use some more talent of my own. I don't
Yeah.
know. Speak for yourself, Soren.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could always use more talent.
Absolutely. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. If your business needs any help with the parking lot, every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's going to do it for today. Hopefully it was at least therapeutic for you. I think it was for us. So for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.